And at the time of filming this video, we are just on the cusp of entering the fall season, which includes Halloween. And of course, black thinset in a Halloween mosaic, they go together so well. You see, unlike grout, which we can buy in the color black, both in powder form and pre-mixed, it's just not that way when it comes to thinset. We don't have that option. Thinset is only available in white or gray, either in the powder form or the pre-mixed variety. And when we talk about one, we can't forget about the other, and that's because they're both cement-based. And I've got my opinions, experiences, and things to watch out for, so I'll share those along the way throughout the video because this might sway you to use one method instead of the other. So in today's video, I'll show you a few different ways to achieve black thinset or grout. My method works on either, and I'll also share my foolproof way for getting it done quickly. Let's get to it. Welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Julie. And on this channel, we talk about tips, tricks, tools, adhesives, materials, and specific mosaic projects, all to shorten your learning curve when it comes to creating mosaic art. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, please consider subscribing. This video came up after I received a comment on a recent video asking, where do you get black thinset? I've done a number of videos here on my channel regarding thinset and its distant cousin, grout. I'll explain their connection in a minute. And in the videos I've done, I've covered things like how to mix up thinset and grout, how to tint or color them, plus other things that you can do with thinset and grout. And I'll include a link to the playlist down below in the description for all of you who are interested in learning more. But one topic I haven't addressed specifically is what's the deal with black thinset? And at the time of filming this video, we are just on the cusp of entering the fall season, which includes Halloween. And of course, black thinset in a Halloween mosaic, they go together so well. So I'm hoping that this video will shed some light on a topic. Maybe you'll be a little more comfortable with the creation of black thinset, and your Halloween projects will definitely benefit from it. I know it's a popular color. You see, unlike grout, which we can buy in the color black, both in powder form and pre-mixed, it's just not that way when it comes to thinset. We don't have that option. Thinset is only available in white or gray, either in the powder form or the pre-mixed variety. But there's no black thinset available, or purple, or tan, or red. I'm trying to think of all the amazing colors which are available in grout. And when we talk about one, we can't forget about the other, and that's because they're both cement-based. However, only one can be used as an adhesive, which is thinset. However, they both can be used as grout. I know, it's so confusing. And there are some things to keep in mind if you plan to use thinset as grout, but in today's video, what we're going to focus on is how do you make black thinset? It's not difficult, it's just an extra step. But why would someone want black thinset? For the same reason that someone might want purple thinset, or yellow thinset, or orange thinset, or green thinset. It has to do with your particular project and your personal preferences. Someone might want a colored thinset to complement their tile work or contrast to their tile work. I've grouted many mosaics with thinset, as you guys have seen me do here on my channel. A couple of reasons why I did it include I have a lot of it and I don't want it to go bad. It's true, it does have a shelf life. And also that I was probably making an outdoor mosaic and I wanted the added benefit and durability of using a fortified thinset. Everyone's got their own reasons. And just as an aside, if you are curious, how do I store thinset? And if you've shopped for it, then you know it generally comes in a 25-pound bag or a 50-pound bag. But in the video I recently did where I gave you a tour of my studio space, including all of this back behind me here, I did share how I store thinset and grout in my studio, so I'll include a link to that video down below in the description. So in today's video, I'll show you a few different ways to achieve black thinset or grout. My method works on either, and I'll also share my foolproof way for getting it done quickly. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. In each of the two methods, I'm going to show you how to mix up black thinset whether you're starting out with white or gray. So for my first method, I'll begin with white thinset. Now, when you have white thinset, you have tons of options as far as what color you can create. It goes pretty much with anything. One option that might be difficult is if you're taking your white grout or thinset and you're wanting to try to make it brighter or more brilliant. I don't know how you could do that. So basically, the world is your oyster other than trying to get your whiter more white. So although this might be obvious, I'm going to show you how easy it is to turn it black. And I've got my opinions, experiences, and things to watch out for, so I'll share those along the way throughout the video because this might sway you to use one method instead of the other. The first method is to mix up your thinset as you normally would with water. However, with this first method, I like to mix it up to the point of being slightly runny. So the thinset consistency is not quite there yet. Now to give you an idea, the normal consistency that I like for the thinset or grout is to be like cookie dough. So right now I'd say the consistency is a bit more like runny peanut butter. And then I'm going to add black acrylic craft paint. Yes, the stuff from the craft store that costs about $2 a bottle. And I'm going to squeeze some into the mixed up thinset. And I'll mix it up to see how the thinset color is looking. Is it gray yet? Is it a light gray, a dark gray? Is it the shade of black I'm wanting yet? If you're going to use this method, I wouldn't use it on an outdoor mosaic. For outdoor mosaics, in order to avoid fading over time, you'll want to use the next method, which we'll get to later in the video. And yes, you'll see it might take more black paint to turn your white thinset to black than it does when we'll start off with the gray thinset. If you like the color but the consistency is still too runny, then add in a little of your thinset, mix it up, and see how the color and consistency are. The more white thinset you mix in, once the color is where you want it to be, the more that desired color gets diluted or lighter. That's why I say this is a bit of a dance. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, and you go back and forth until you ultimately reach a color and consistency you're looking for. And now I'm going to mix up black thinset starting with gray powder thinset, and again, I'm using the black acrylic craft paint. So I'm going about this batch in the exact same way as we just did, and I've mixed up gray thinset to the consistency of runny peanut butter. And now I'm going to add in the black craft paint. The reason I'm mixing the thinset to a runny consistency first is because we're going to be adding more liquid or moisture to this method of creating black thinset. But it's a different kind of moisture, and it's thicker than water. And it changes the overall consistency of the thinset or grout rather quickly once you've mixed in the craft acrylic paint. So we'd rather start off runny than having the thinset too stiff to work with and not at our desired color yet. If you mix up your thinset and then you add your craft paint and the consistency is still too runny and the texture is not of cookie dough, then add in a little more of your powder thinset. And I mean a little. A little goes a long way when thinset or grout is mixed up at this point in the process. So I'll be honest, I like to share with you all what your options are when it comes to mosaic making. And I also like to share my opinions when I feel strongly about something. And using craft paint as a grout or thinset colorant is one of those things that I'm going to share my opinion on. I don't prefer to use craft paint as a colorant. it turns the thinset or the grout into an almost whipped-like consistency. I don't know how else to describe it. So if you're familiar with whipped butter or whipped cream cheese, that's kind of what it turns into. Plus, I worry about the fading factor over time. But like I said, it's an option, and craft paint costs about $2 a bottle, so there you go. But again, I just wanted to share my personal opinion. Okay, I'm liking how this thinset is looking color-wise, so this batch is ready for me to use. And before we move on to method number 2, if you're curious about the items that I'm using in today's video, and you'd like to learn a little more about them, I'll include a list with links down below in the description. So now that we've mastered creating black thinset, or grout if that's what you're making, using acrylic craft paint, now we're going to move on to our second method, which is my go-to. This one involves something called oxide. Oxides for cementitious products like grout and thinset are highly pigmented powders which help us change the color. I prefer this method because I can quickly and easily create colors that are not only highly pigmented, but they also won't fade in outdoor mosaics, or really over time in general. And that's a biggie for me. The downside is that there are significantly less oxide colors available compared to acrylic craft paint. So this is where you'll need to get real friendly with a color wheel, and you'll need to buy more than one color of oxide in order to mix things up to your desired color. And we'll talk more about that later in the video. However, I think it's a positive that you can mix up these different colors of oxide to create a custom color of thinset or grout. And like I said a moment ago, the colors are highly pigmented, and knowing they won't fade over time is wonderful. Another thing about oxides is that they have the same texture as powdered thinset and grout, so they interact beautifully with each other. And as you can see, I started by mixing my white thinset with the black oxide. I'm stating the obvious here, but you'll see that it's going to take more oxide to turn the white thinset black than it will for the gray thinset to turn black. When you look closely at the dry powder thinset with the oxide, it'll go from various shades of gray until finally black. So although you can definitely turn white thinset black by using oxide, it's going to take more oxide than if you had started with the gray thinset. So I'll mix the dry powders together and see how the color is looking before I add any water. So one thing I like to do when mixing up a specific color of thinset or grout is to create a recipe. And I do this for a few reasons. Some are obvious, some are not. The first being, if I'm mixing up a color that I absolutely love and would like to recreate and use again on a future mosaic, by having a recipe, I'm able to refer back to it to recreate that color again and again and again. This is especially a good idea if you're doing client work, in order to be able to match the color should your client have a repair sometime in the future, or if they want you to create another mosaic using that same exact grout color. Maybe they want you to create a set or a collection of mosaics over time. Then you'll be able to reference back and see what went into creating that specific grout color. Making a recipe for every color you create, other than the standard white or gray which comes out of a bag, is a great habit to get into. Another reason to create a recipe is to make sure the next time you want to recreate that color that you have enough of everything. So enough grout, enough colorant, etc., before you even begin mixing up your thinset or grout. When I'm creating a recipe for a specific color, there are 16 things that I track in order to be able to successfully recreate that color again in the future. I know, crazy, 16 things? Wow. And I track all of it on my grout thinset recipe card, which I created in order to have all of the information organized and in one place. And even though we're just mixing up black thinset today, by having a recipe, I'll be able to check what materials I have before I even begin to mix up a batch of thinset or grout. If you'd like to learn more about the grout thinset recipe card, I'll include a link to it down below in the description. But once I feel like things are going in the desired direction, where the thinset is definitely leaning more towards the black color, I'll start adding a little bit of water. Again, I want to keep the thinset a little on the runny side until I'm closer to my desired color. And then once I'm close, I may do a little bit of that dance we were talking about earlier, where I mix a tiny bit of white thinset, a tiny bit of oxide, I mix it up to thicken it up, and I see if we're getting closer, or maybe I'm at that cookie dough consistency that I so much want. Doing this dance of mixing in the thinset and a colorant can get you into trouble though, which we'll talk about in a minute. And once the color and consistency are where I want them to be, I'll let it sit for about 5 minutes before I start using it. Let's move on to the gray thinset, and I gotta say, this is my absolute favorite. This is my go-to method. I love it. So I start with gray thinset and I add black oxide and mix up the powders. I'll look at it closely with my eye, or you could use a magnifying glass or take a picture with your phone and magnify it. But basically, I want the dry mix to look really, really dark. Now, obviously, if you want a deep, true black, then you're gonna need to use more oxide. But once I see that the dry powders are pretty dark when mixed together, that's when I started mixing in the water like usual, getting it to the desired consistency of cookie dough. One thing I need to caution you about. So when you're mixing up smaller batches of grout or thinset like we are today, and you're using a colorant like the acrylic craft paint or the oxide, always add in a little at a time and then mix it up. Don't add in a lot of it and then mix it up. It's harder to tell the gray powder grains from the black oxide grains because there's not much contrast going on there. And I say this because the more of something you add in, whether that's water or a colorant, the more you're diluting the actual base of grout or thinset. And yes, the powders need water in order to be activated and mixed. I understand that. But too much moisture can also dilute them. This is why it's important to get your grout or thinset to the consistency of cookie dough. And you want to get to that consistency by making sure that the majority of what's in your cup or your mixing bowl is either grout or thinset. The majority should not be the colorant that you're working with. And then once everything looks good and it's a shade of black I'm happy with, then I'll let the thinset or grout just sit for about 5 minutes before I use it. We're good, right? We're good? Yeah? Wow, we got that video done before the thunderstorms. I'm excited for fall. Not like the temperatures change crazy here in Miami, but just, I don't know. It's a vibe. It's a little warm. I should get like a little, I wonder if I could get like a little fan. I mean, seriously, how long have I been doing this? And I'm always talking about how warm it is. Plus the drinks, the fall drinks. Y'all, we're just flying through this. Yeah, flying through this. And, you know, we're having fun. It's a good thing. I'm still warm though. Pumpkin spice latte, yeah, it's okay, but there's another one that I like. Something with caramel, salted caramel, some or other. Good stuff. If you are planning a Halloween mosaic, or whatever, planning a mosaic to use black grout or black thinset, drop me a note. I would love to hear about it. Yeah, let's go fall. Team fall, right? Plus football. Anyways, thanks for spending a little bit of your time with me today. I so appreciate it, and I appreciate you. And I will be back here soon. For more mosaic inspiration, check out one of these 2 videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.